The best of downtown from 7 to 8 a.m. on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket and 929theticket.com. This is the best of downtown.
Well, a good Sunday morning to you. Welcome in. On Sunday, May 4th. 2014, Best of Downtown, previously recorded edition of the program. Rich Kimball, Brian Stackpole with you, Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket, all over the planet at 929theticket.com. Got a fun show for you this morning, some of our favorites from the week that was, a little Patriots talk, and some variety, too. Comedian Jeff Altman will join us. We'll talk about the Maine basketball coaching search. We'll talk with George Mitchell, the former senator who goes in the Maine Sports Hall of Fame, later on today, and a look at Major League Baseball, too, with USA Today's Ted Berg. We kick things off, though, as we close in the National Football League draft this coming Thursday. Earlier this week, we had a chance to talk with Patriots broadcaster Bob Socci about some of the off-season moves for the Patriots as they get ready for the draft. And one of those that maybe went under the radar a little bit, the signing of an extension, a 2-year option exerted by the club on Nate Solder.
Yeah, it certainly is, and it certainly seems to be a no-brainer. You know, the class of 2011, the first class of that fifth-year option, the first-round picks for teams, and we have seen a number of high-profile players from that class already have their options picked up, and, of course, there are teams who decided not to pick up the option, or in the case of a Blaine Gabbert, he was traded, and therefore will not have his option picked up. And it's funny because there are so many questions about this year's quarterback class, and the three guys that stood out there from that 2011 class, inconspicuous by their absence from the list of players who've had the fifth-year option exercised, all quarterbacks, whereas a guy like Nate Solder, as you mentioned, kind of flew under the radar as a left tackle, but he's instrumental, of course, in protecting your quarterback in Tom Brady. And Nate's been a solid player for the Pats. I know last year the offensive line had a lot of protection issues, but they were in concert as well with other parts of the offense, including the newcomers at wide receiver. And a lot of the pressure that the Patriots did yield came from the interior as opposed to at the expense of the tackles. But Solder has graded out well in his first 3 years in the league. He's a bright guy. He's a very good athlete. I think that he has continued to improve in each of his first 3 seasons. So to have him for 2014, but also now for 2015, with time to work on a longer length extension, yeah, I think it gives the Patriots really a great asset in their offensive line and continuing some of the continuity they've enjoyed there.
Yeah, Jason LaConfora from CBS on. He was talking about Bill Belichick's work in free agency and described it as beyond special. What did he mean by that?
Well, certainly I think the acquisition of Darrelle Revis is one that many believe will be beyond special this season. But Jason was asked the question toward the end of our interview last Sunday, and unfortunately he was on a golf course and the wind picked up right as he started the answer, and some of it was inaudible. But I think what he was talking about is the track record that the Patriots have had over the last 13, 14 years. After they broke through in 2001, to continually replenish the team in various ways, and often with low-profile free agent pickups. And Belichick and his coaching staff and personnel staff have done a great job through the years of continuing the success, even when they've had changes at various spots on the field, and often, again, with under-the-radar type pickups, guys that can come in, like an Andre Carter, for example, in 2011, and have a Pro Bowl-type season for that one-year hit. Or in the case of, last year, the Patriots were in dire straits a couple of different stages of the season at various spots, and they went out and they got guys to help them in a pinch, including a guy like Matthew Mulligan, who was a bit overlooked, I think, but nevertheless was very important to that team in terms of giving them an inline blocking presence at tight end, and certainly helped that run game immensely in the second half of last year. So I think it's a tribute in Jason's reply, not only to the work that Belichick has done this past offseason with the move everybody knows about, and that's going out to get Darrelle Revis, but I also think the moves that the Patriots have made over the course of the last decade and a half in acquiring players that, again, aren't on the radar publicly, but certainly are very instrumental in continuing the success the Pats have enjoyed.
So with that in mind, do the Patriots depend less on the draft than some other teams do? They view it maybe as just one more piece of the overall plan.
Well, I certainly think it's a very, very important piece, and I wouldn't say that they depend on it less than any other team. I think every pick is as valuable to every organization as any other, and that goes without for the Patriots as well. And I think you look at what to impact their team through the draft. One of the things that they do on a fairly regular basis that sometimes frustrates fans is that they will acquire more picks and move down, as they did last year when they traded away that 29th pick to Minnesota because the Vikings wanted to get Cordero Patterson, the outstanding wide receiver prospect. Well, as it turned out, the Patriots parlayed that pick into really a surplus of very good young talent. And they wound up stocking their defensive depth charts with players like Jamie Collins, Logan Ryan, even a guy like Deron Harmon, who was almost a complete unknown on draft night when he was picked by the Patriots in the first half of the draft. And, coming out of Rutgers, a program that had a pretty strong pipeline to the pros and certainly has a very strong pipeline to the NFL. Again, even in that case, Harmon was overlooked, and by the end of the year, he was playing in a very valuable role for this team and out there for a lot of quality reps, including some starting appearances in place of an injured Steve Gregory. So, for the Pats, you go back to last year and the previous seasons, they have been able to acquire a lot of picks at times and have, again, drafted very well at times in the mid to late rounds. Julian Edelman was almost an afterthought pick coming out of Kent State as a quarterback. They picked up guys like Nate Ebner, who was exclusively, in essence, a special teams player at Ohio State. And he doesn't play much in the Patriots secondary, but he's a very valuable special teams player, and he was right on the spot last year in overtime to help the Patriots beat the Denver Broncos when he recovered that muff punt. And that's no accident. That's no coincidence. Ebner's a guy who's had a lot of big plays in special teams. So, I think the Patriots don't draft high. So maybe, in their case, it doesn't seem as though the draft impacts them as much as some other teams. They've got those early to, team slot draft choices in the first round and get a big impact player right away. But the Pats generally draft late in the first round, or they move down and they pick up a lot of depth and quality depth at that.
We're talking with Bob Socci, the voice of the New England Patriots on the 98.5 Sports Hub, Patriots Radio Network. So heading into the draft, not too many days away, what's your top priority? I assume defense. Would it be the line for them?
Rich, it's so funny because I think, the consensus has been defensive line, tight end, maybe running back in that order for the Patriots. But as I joke on and off the air, nobody knows what the Patriots are going to do come Thursday, May 8th. A lot depends on what transpires before their scheduled pick at 29. There's a very strong chance we could see them do exactly what they did last year, and that's trade out of that spot. Perhaps even to move up, if not more likely to move down. But I do think, along with many, many others, I think the consensus is the Pats would go for somebody on the defensive line. You look at guys like, for example, and these are two players from Notre Dame, Louis Nix III or Stephon Tuitt, one interior player, kind of like that classic defensive tackle type, like a poor man's Vince Wilfork, if you will, or Tuitt. There's a little more position versatility, tall and fast on the outside. And both of whom played last year at less than full strength and full health for Notre Dame, but were very, very good in 2012 on that run to the BCS title game for the Irish. Rashid Hageman, who's a very enticing athlete from the University of Minnesota as a defensive tackle, but has some questions about his so-called motor and how hard he plays on a consistent basis, at least based on his collegiate career. But I do think that makes sense. That's where the Patriots really built from in this draft with their defense. They would do well to add someone who can spell Chandler Jones and Rob Ninkovich, or at least complement Chandler Jones as an outside pass rusher, or help to create some pressure from the interior, because when you look at the two defensive tackles who, if healthy, and that's a big if, to start 2014, they're Vince Wilfork and Tommy Kelly, both are north of 30, and therefore you'd have an opportunity to get an heir apparent who could be both a run stuffer, but as noted as well, really command the interior of that defensive line and at least free up guys like Chandler Jones and others to pressure the quarterback.
And that was the voice of the New England Patriots, Bob Socci, from earlier in Downtown with Rich Kimball last week, as he gave us a little preview of the upcoming NFL draft, which will get underway with the first round on Thursday night. Again, 2 weeks delayed from what it usually was the last couple of years, but the NFL draft will soon be here. And we thank Bob for talking to us about the upcoming season and also some of the draft projections for the New England Patriots. You're listening to the Best of Downtown here for this Sunday morning edition, the 4th day of May, 2014. Glad to have you on board. So we've got a great program coming up as well as we continue on for this 7 o'clock hour in this morning. Coming up after the break, we'll hear from comedian Jeff Altman, and it'll give us a little insight, too, on his next appearance on The Late Show with David Letterman. Stay tuned. Jeff Altman comes up next year as you're listening to the Best of Downtown, Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket.
Best of Downtown on your early Sunday morning. I'm Rich Kimball, along with Brian Stackpole here on 92.9 The Ticket. Well, very few people, if anybody, have been on Late Night with David Letterman more than our next guest. Comedian Jeff Altman has been making people laugh for over 30 years. Also has over 40 appearances on the David Letterman Show. We chatted with him earlier this week and talked about his time spent working side by side with David Letterman.
Well, I think, one, the inspiration of Johnny Carson was a huge factor. And I think the fact that he enjoys working, enjoys what he does, and is so good at it. I mean, he's sort of the dean of broadcasting at this point, as far as late night TV goes.
Somebody mentioned this recently, that one advantage he has over some of the other late night guys is just that broadcasting background too. That he did TV, and he was a weather guy, and he wasn't just an actor or a comedian, but he also had a broadcasting background.
That's right. He was a weatherman before he was on the air in Indianapolis, and he even got stuck once as a young kid. He was about 21 years old, and they had a shot of the Indianapolis 500, and ABC had to go to him on the track for something, and that was one of his earliest experiences on national TV that I don't think anybody knows about.
From a personal perspective, what will you miss most about going on the show?
The money. No. I'll just miss Dave. I'll miss the whole show. I'll miss all the people that I've gotten to know over 30 years, that have been there. All the people that have been working with him, and all the people that do the assignments for getting guests ready. I know all those people. I know the head writer. I know Bill Sheft is like his best friend on the show. All those people are friends of mine, and it's going to be awfully sorry to see them go have to look for other jobs.
Hey, now, the last time you were on with Letterman, I think it was the last time you were on, you sat in with Paul and the band and played the drums, and that's no fluke. You've been a drummer for years. Well,
I was lucky. I started out, and when I was about 6 years old, and I studied at Syracuse University, where my hometown, and my dad kind of taught me how to play, and by the time I was 12 or 13 years old, I was a pretty good drummer. And so I stayed with it, and my drums are all packed up right now, so I don't have drums available to me. But about a week before I went into the Letterman show, I went into the studio every day and practiced, and then I did that little thing with Paul.
We're talking with actor, comedian, drummer, magician Jeff Altman here on Downtown. We talked to you about this a little bit. We had this competition last month where we had listeners vote on our favorite guests of the year, and you did very well in that, but we were most impressed. It was a strange matchup, but you knocked off Pulitzer Prize-winning historian Doris Kearns Goodwin. You crushed her, and we understand she would like to have a rematch, but she wants mud wrestling.
It's perfectly okay. I knew I could take her on the radio, but in the ring, I don't know. I've heard she's very tough, especially when she gets muddy.
Yeah, she's scrappy. She stays low.
Yeah. You've got a great new show on TV there up in Maine called Down East Pickering.
Yes. Have you seen it?
Oh, my God, it's my favorite show. You've got Duke and Codfish and Yummy, and they're all characters. And the other day, I guess Codfish and Yummy went out to fish, and they sat out there, and you know the spirit of Maine is patience.
Right.
Absolute patience. So Codfish and Yummy are sitting there fishing, and nobody moves a muscle for an hour. It's 6 o'clock in the morning. 7 o'clock in the morning, nobody's moved a muscle. 8 o'clock in the morning, nothing. Their fishing lines haven't moved. Finally, at around 11 o'clock, Yummy shifts his feet a little bit, and Codfish turns around and says, Yummy, did you come here to fish or dance?
See, now that's good TV right there.
Absolutely. That's the real McCoy.
Hey, speaking of TV, could we play a little game with you?
Sure.
I've done a little research because you've done so many television shows through the years, and I noticed a pattern, and I have to think you were involved in this, that you have some unusual names of characters you've played on some classic television shows.
Is that right?
So I was wondering, if I named a character, could you name the TV show you played that character on?
Geez, that's a good one. I have no idea.
Well, let's give it a try.
All right.
Howie Bloom.
Howie Bloom. On Howie Bloom. Was that 30-something?
No, that was Caroline in the City.
Oh, my God. Yeah, I was on there for like 2 seconds. I kissed a girl, and that was it.
All right, how about, I love this name, Monty Ovary.
That was 30-something.
That was 30-something, absolutely.
That I remember.
Judge Mike Watson.
Judge Mike Watson on Night Court.
Night Court, yes, absolutely. Gary Bernstein.
Gary Bernstein. Maybe that was an alias I was using to get to Canada.
On 2 episodes, and this was one of the great TV shows of all time that tweaked the cast a little bit and changed the name of the show in the last couple of years.
Oh, man. Baywatch?
No, Archie Bunker's Place.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I played an attorney on that show.
Right.
For 2 episodes.
Right,
it was great. It was great working with Carol O'Connor, who was a really, really close friend of my ex-wife. In fact, when we were married, they threw a party for us.
Wow. What about when you weren't married? Did they have a party?
When I wasn't married?
Yeah. Like when you got divorced, did they have a party?
No, I had that party.
No, all right. All right, a couple more characters. Murray Gressler.
Murray Gressler. Is that Baywatch?
No, that was WKRP in Cincinnati.
Oh, that's right. That's when I had the cocaine in my socks.
And this might be my favorite name of all, a very early work for you, where you played the great character of Clint Mullet.
Clint Mullet? Clint Mullet. Was I playing the role of Andre Agassi? That's an inside joke.
Yes.
I think you got it.
I did. No, that was Mork and Mindy.
Oh, that's right. I was the reporter.
Right.
I played the reporter on that show, and I followed Mork around the whole time thinking he was from outer space, but no one would believe me.
And that was comedian Jeff Altman talking about his career, playing a little game about some of the characters he's played with Rich, and also talking about his upcoming appearance on The Late Show with David Letterman, as he's going to be close to a record. He's appeared so many times with David Letterman, who will be ending his Late Show run coming up in 2015. You're listening to the Best of Downtown here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. Glad to have you alongside us this morning. So we got a great show with still much more to come. We've already talked to Bob Socci, Jeff Altman, and coming up after the break, we'll get a little inside scoop on what's happening with the Maine basketball situation from OneBidWonders.com author and owner and operator Sam Perkins, who will join us after this break. You're listening to the Best of Downtown here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket.
Care about my car. And she don't care about my money. And that's real good.
Back on the Best of Downtown, a previously recorded edition for you.
I can see clearly now, the rain is gone.
Sunday morning, the 4th day of May. Maine basketball closing in on naming a new men's basketball coach. Search is on. Committee not even actually formally announced during the course of the week, although we learned who made up the membership of that committee information has been hard to come by from the U, but our friend Sam Perkins has ways around that kind of thing. Sam, of course, writes for OneBidWonders.com, and we caught up with him at the tail end of the week to talk about some of the candidates, and it looks like the field may be down to as few as two. We began our conversation by talking about one of those, former Stonehill head coach and current Northeastern assistant Dave McLaughlin.
Yeah, he's had a lot of success at Stonehill at the Division II level. He was at Northeastern this past year. I've heard that he's a good recruiter. He's good at player development. He's a young guy. He has good relationships with his players. I've heard he's a very good X's and O's coach, which is a big thing up there as far as what has been missing in recent years. He has a reputation as, doing a very good job of making, adjustments in game. Especially when he was at Stonehill. I think one of the questions with him is, he was very, very successful at Stonehill. You always wonder, can he make that leap up to D1? And can he recruit at the Division I level? Can he recruit up there in Maine? Because it is a different animal at D2 than it is at D1. It's worth mentioning that there are some advantages to coaching at the Division II level versus the low Division I level where the admissions requirements aren't quite the same. The NCAA clearinghouse isn't quite the same. Sometimes, the reason why good D2 teams are so stacked is they can get kids who can't get past NCAA clearinghouse at D1. You always wonder, but Stonehill has a reputation as being a very, very good academic school, so I don't think that's a problem with McLaughlin. I know he's a guy who's been getting a lot of, buzz. The word is that he's been up there today. I've heard that they're very high on him. One guy that I think is flying a little under the radar that, I think could be another very legitimate candidate is Bob Walsh, who has been the head coach for Rhode Island College for the past 9 years and has just turned them into a perennial Division III powerhouse. He's a really interesting guy. He's a great basketball mind, and he just has a great reputation as far as X's and O's and as far as building a program. And, fostering that real kind of program feel which you need at the Division III level to win when you don't have things like scholarships and stuff like that. So they're interesting candidates, both of them, and those to me might be the two front runners at this point.
Yeah, you'd also mentioned some other guys that were believed to have had at least Skype interviews. Jared Grasso, an assistant at Iona, and Bill Barton of Pitt. Yep.
I'd heard that both of them did. Barton's interesting. He's obviously has a great resume. You always wonder higher level guys how they do if they drop down to the America East. Can they recruit? Obviously, there's a lot of panache to that, to being at Pitt. But, we've seen guys from high level struggle here in the America East because it's just so much different recruiting at this level. It's so much different fielding a staff and fielding a team with a lot of the restrictions that come with the territory. He's. I haven't heard that he's out of it. I haven't heard Grasso's out of it. I believe both of them are still in the thick of things. But it's just kind of interesting with some of those higher level guys.
We're talking with Sam Perkins of One Bid Wonders here on Downtown, and we mentioned this earlier when we talked about your report that these are not rumors. You're not reporting rumors. You've confirmed all these names with, I believe, 4 different sources.
Yeah.
So this is not just speculation.
Yeah, all the guys that were on that list, and that was as of yesterday, and as we've discussed, from what I've heard, Jay Young, Chris Markwood, and Jim McCarthy, who's the Towson assistant, who was previously a Northeastern assistant, are now out of it. But yesterday when I put that all together, I confirmed each of those guys with no fewer than 4 people that I really trust that are involved in the scene, so to speak. So they were guys that got interviews that were very legitimate candidates. I'm disappointed that Jay Young's out of it because I think he's an extremely good coach who could really use a shot like this. He had great success at the Division II level. And that's one of the things I've heard that the committee up there is really weighing heavily is head coaching experience, even if it's at the non-Division I level, is they want someone who's run the show before, which I think that worked against a guy like Markwood, who's young, who has a great reputation. I think as much as, him having come up under Ted Woodward might have been guilt by association, I've heard that just not having been a previous head coach is also hurting him. So it's kind of interesting to me that Jay Young was, kind of came in as a hot commodity and then was crossed off the list so quickly because he's got that previous head coaching experience. He had tremendous success at New Haven, which was Division II. But maybe the thinking is that was 9 years ago, and that was, a long time.
Are you surprised that this whole thing is moving along at such a pace?
I would say I'm surprised in the stance that previous administrations at the University of Maine just really did not seem to get it, quote unquote. They just didn't seem to get with it, and just seemed to bungle things like this. So I'm surprised maybe in that standpoint, but I'm not surprised because there is some urgency here. I mean, Maine has a bunch of available scholarships now with players leaving. They could have even more if more players decide to leave because, they don't, like the head coaching hire or anything like that. And they're going to have to be able to restock and reload a roster, especially considering the level of talent that they've lost. And they're, in danger of missing out on the entire spring signing period.
And that was Sam Perkins of OneBidWonders.com on the Maine men's basketball coaching search, which has really picked up some speed over the last couple of days. Hopefully they'll make a decision here very soon because they've, from all reports, have met with some candidates, had some interviews online via Skype, and seem to know who they want to be the next head man at that men's basketball program. This is the Best of Downtown edition on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket here, May 4th, 2014. Glad to have you alongside of us here on the station of WEZQ 92.9 FM. After this break that's approaching, we'll hear from former Senator George Mitchell as it will be inducted into the Maine Sports Hall of Fame coming up later this afternoon. You're listening to the Best of Downtown. We'll be right back with much more here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket.
It's the Best of Downtown on your Sunday morning on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket and 929theticket.com all over the planet. Be sure and follow us on Twitter at Downtown Rich K. Facebook page is Downtown with Rich Kimball. I am at Rich Kimball. Brian Stackpole is who he is. He's here as well on your Sunday morning program. We had a great opportunity this week to talk with a real legend in the history of the state of Maine. Had a remarkable career growing up in Waterville, went on to become a judge, worked for Senator Ed Muskie for many years, became a senator in his own right, and rose to become the Senate Majority Leader. Through the years, George Mitchell has also had quite a big hand in sports, too, as part of the ownership group of the Boston Red Sox, and, of course, the author of the Mitchell Report, which really moved baseball ahead of all the other sports in many ways in trying to solve the problem of performance-enhancing drugs. We caught up with Senator Mitchell in London on Thursday and talked about his coming induction into the Maine Sports Hall of Fame later today.
I never imagined it, not only when I was growing up in Waterville, but ever since. It was a complete surprise when Dick Whitmore called me to tell me about it. As far as the bragging rights goes, my brother's really kind of upset about it because my brother Johnny is in the Sports Hall of Fame, and he thinks that my getting in dilutes the honor. Reduces the level of high-ranking athletes that have been admitted in there because I really was not as good an athlete as my brothers. So it'll be a subject of much discussion this weekend.
So despite this, you'll still be Swisher's little brother.
That's right. Always have been, always will be.
Well, just about a year ago at this time, we were talking with former Senator William Cohen, who was also going into the Maine Sports Hall of Fame. And I'll ask you the question I asked him. What was it about being a young athlete and being involved in sports at an early age? What lessons did you learn that served you later on in life?
Sports are an important part of American life, and I think they can be helpful in many ways. One is, of course, that you learn teamwork in most sports, particularly basketball, which is what I played. Nobody can do it by themselves, and you have to learn to work with others. Secondly, you learn that you don't win all the time. Very few teams win every game. So you learn that defeat and failure is a regular part of life, and you have to learn from losing and stand up and go back and battle again the next time. That's a very valuable lesson. Third is, of course, good health. It's an important part of life for everyone, trying to stay in shape, particularly after you leave school and you don't engage in organized sports like basketball. You have to find ways to keep yourself physically healthy. So I've always felt privileged to have been part of an athletic family. It isn't a joke. It really is true that I wasn't as good as my brothers. And I think, fortunately for me, the Hall of Fame criteria is not solely athletic ability. It's other contributions, and I'm glad I was able to get in on that basis.
Well, you've continued your connection with athletics, being part of the ownership group of the Boston Red Sox, 3 championships, and each unique in their own way. But last year's title had to be very special because of what had happened in 2012 and because of this unique group of young men that were part of that Red Sox team.
It really was. You hit it on the head. Each of the 3 championships was and always will be special. I've been part of the Red Sox management since this group took over the Red Sox about a dozen years ago. I had known John Henry previously. I'd been on the board of the Florida Marlins when he was the owner there. And so when he and the others asked me to join their group, I didn't hesitate, and I've been lucky to have been a participant since then. It's been a great experience. It's a great organization. And last year I can recall that 6th game at Fenway Park. It really was an electric evening, and there was a certain inevitability about their winning. Everybody just kind of knew it was going to happen, and it did, and the way it happened was really a special part of life.
We're talking with Senator George Mitchell here on Downtown, who joins us from London. Your Mitchell report on the use of performance-enhancing drugs in Major League Baseball opened a lot of eyes, and in many ways was the conduit that led us to where we are today. Still some problems in baseball, but I think everyone would agree that Major League Baseball right now has the strongest drug program in all of professional sports. Are you pleased with the progress that's been made?
Yes, I commend both the management and the players for what they've done in recent years. I think you have to keep this in perspective. It's an ongoing problem. We're not going to ever reach a point where nothing bad ever happens. You know, every state, every country has laws against crime. Nobody expects that crime is going to end just because we have laws to try to punish those who engage in criminal activity or deter future action. It's sort of the same way with drugs in sports. It's been around for most of human history. The financial rewards are so tremendous in professional sports now that the behavior is skewed toward trying to get an edge. And right now there are people engaged in various parts of the world in the illegal activity of trying to develop new performance-enhancing drugs that can't be detected by current methods. So it's kind of an ongoing problem of management, and I think baseball does deserve great credit for having what is by far the strongest program. And in particular, I think the players have undergone a meaningful and positive transformation in attitude. For many years, the players were opposed to any form of drug testing, and it took a lot of pressure, public pressure, congressional pressure, and others to get them to come around to support it. They didn't cooperate in my investigation, but I think since then you've seen what really is a remarkable transformation, and now they are among the strongest proponents of a tough and effective program. So I think all of them deserve congratulations.
When you first became Senate Majority Leader, you reached out to the opposition party and especially the leadership and said to them, I'll never embarrass you, I'll never criticize you publicly. You were able to reach across the aisle, be successful, and find compromise. We've become so polarized right now in Washington. Is there a way to get that professional relationship back and to be able to make some progress in the halls of Congress?
It's pretty difficult in current circumstances. I did, one of the first persons I called was Bob Dole, who was the Republican leader after I became Senate Majority Leader, and we worked out a good relationship, still have a very close personal relationship. To this day, he and I have never had a harsh word passed between us, either publicly or privately. and we were able to work together, although it wasn't easy. You have to keep this in context. Politics in the United States has always been rough and tumble, going way back to the beginnings of time. As a professor from the University of Maine, Amy Freed, who wrote an article in the Bangor Daily News just a couple of years ago about the presidential campaign of 1800 between John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, now both revered figures in our history, and it was really a rough campaign, name-calling and a lot of bad things said about each other. So it's always been rough and tumble, but I think the elements now that have changed it are the power of electronic communications, both radio and particularly television, and the massive amounts of money that are now really awash in the political system. They are having a devastating effect on how you campaign and how you run for office, and the permanent campaign is now a feature of American life. You don't just campaign in an election year, you campaign round the clock, round the calendar, every day that you're in office. And it distorts the whole process, makes it very tough, and I think it's going to be difficult to change, frankly, and ultimately will only change if the American people demand it.
And that was former U.S. Senator George Mitchell from earlier in the week on Downtown with Rich Kimball talking about his upcoming induction later this afternoon to the Maine Sports Hall of Fame. You're listening to the Best of Downtown for this 4th day of May 2014. May the 4th be with you for all you Star Wars fans out there. Glad to have you alongside of us for this Best of edition, and we'll take another break upcoming here on this program. On the other side, we'll talk a little MLB after we're done with the first month of the season. We'll get a little bit of a preview of the rest of the season and also a recap of the first month with USA Today's Ted Berg. That and much more still to come as you're listening to the Best of Downtown with Rich Kimball on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket.
Back on the Best of Downtown for your Sunday morning here on 92.9 The Ticket. Talked a little baseball on Friday's show with our good friend Ted Berg of USA Today, and let's give a listen to some of the highlights from that conversation.
Well, you know, it's a funny thing, and it's a tough one to figure out because I don't know that anyone saw it coming entering the season. A team that, you know, just a couple of years had been sort of a perennial contender, if not one that runs away with their division, but they've just gotten such incredible starting pitching, and unfortunately, I'm not sure. Given the guys they have there, not to diminish them, but not really guys with this type of history. So I'm not sure how long it'll last for the Brewers.
Now, the other side of the coin, the Arizona Diamondbacks, who have just been god-awful.
Yeah, they have been bad. I mean, I think the loss of Patrick Corbin was devastating to them. I don't know that anyone really realized it at the time, how bad their pitching staff would be. Again, they'll be better. You know, Bronson Arroyo is not going to maintain an ERA over 7. Brandon McCarthy's a better pitcher than he has been. So they'll improve. But I think at this point, I mean, that's a division with actually, you know, what looked to be a bunch of good teams. Which I wouldn't have expected coming into the year. The Rockies have played real well. The Giants have played well, and of course the Dodgers are the Dodgers. So it seems like it's next to impossible, or going to be next to impossible for the Diamondbacks to unbury themselves there.
Now you also wrote another big surprise in the National League is that the Mets aren't that terrible after all, and that maybe it's because ownership and management set such a high bar for them to win. What do they say? 82, 83 games.
Well, Alderson said. I mean, the story was that Sandy Alderson, the GM, said in a closed door meeting, "Well, let's try to win 90 games this year." And it kind of the way the press works here, things like that, you know, leak out and then become this frequently restated thing, like as if Alderson came out and guaranteed 90 wins publicly. So I think it's been sort of taken out of context a little bit pretty frequently. People saying, well, the Mets say they're going to win 90 games. They never said they're going to win 90 games. They said they want to win 90 games, which you'd think would be the case for every team.
Absolutely.
That said, you know, they're on pace for it, and so maybe Alderson will have a little bit of a chance to make good on that hope, I guess.
Ted Berg of USA Today talking baseball with us here on Downtown. But over in the American League, one of the great stories early in the season is Jose Abreu. Is this guy good enough to end the U.S.-Cuba embargo for everything?
Man, I hope so. I mean, and obviously there's so much more to the relationship, and you read about what Puig went through to get here, and you realize, those are the things that are getting reported because he's Yasiel Puig, because he's the guy who's the sensation in Los Angeles, and you look at all of the other, Cuban players who have made that leap, and you think maybe all of these guys have gone through similar situations, or at least, many of them, and who knows the shady dealings it's required to get them there. So you just wish from a purely a baseball fan standpoint that all the best Cuban players would just be able to come here and play for major league teams immediately, just to guarantee the best baseball. And Abreu's really just another example of how much talent is on that island. He's a guy, I think that if you looked up his stats in Cuba, which are kind of hard to find and sort of tough to contextualize without people knowing a ton about how the various parks plays and that competition, but Abreu was unbelievable there. I mean, he put the numbers he put up in Cuba put Puig and Yoenis Cespedes to shame. He was basically hitting like Ted Williams there. So I don't know that anyone expected he'd hit 10 home runs in his first month, but this is what they paid for. Nobody
in the American League, team-wise, seems to be setting the world on fire. Has anybody been a surprise to you, either for good or bad?
Well, it's the Red Sox have been a little surprising that they haven't come out of the gate hot. It's so early, and I'd hate to say, they don't have, their games, they're 3 or 4 games back, I guess. They've got a whole lot of time to right that ship. The A's have been really good. I think at this point we kind of expect it. It still always seems like a little bit of magic how they're good. They lost a couple of pitchers heading into the season, as almost everybody did, and yet they've still managed to get just great starting pitching. They play good defense. They do just about everything well, and so that's why they've got the best record in the league, I guess.
Who's the least interesting team in all of Major League Baseball?
That's a good question. I mean, I kind of the way I look at baseball, I spend enough time diving into things that I sort of find something interesting in every team. I find the Mariners generally uninteresting. I guess it's interesting the way they go about business sometimes, but I tend to just not really enjoy watching them play. I hate to say that, but something about it, like they don't score that many runs and never seem to. Then they came out and made a huge splash with Cano, and it seemed like they were going to follow that up with more, and then they added Corey Hart, and that was about it. Days when Felix Hernandez isn't pitching, it's not terribly exciting.
And that was Ted Berg of USA Today talking a little baseball and MLB action with us after the first month of the 2014 season. One final break left on this Best of Downtown edition. When we come back, we'll wrap up this edition of the show and also preview what's to come for the next 5 editions of Downtown with Rich Kimball, which airs weekly from 4 to 6 p.m. right here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. We'll be back with much more here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket for this Sunday morning.
That's going to wrap it up for a Sunday morning Best of Downtown. Thanks to everybody on the show today. Patriots broadcaster Bob Socci, comedian Jeff Altman, Sam Perkins of One Bid Wonders, Senator George Mitchell, and Ted Berg, the baseball writer of USA Today. Got some good stuff coming up for you over the course of the week on Downtown. We'll kick things off tomorrow as we begin closing in on Draft Day. Our NFL and Boston insiders will update us on not only what the Patriots might do, but others will be looking for as well. And the draft that gets underway on Thursday. Maine baseball coach Steve Trimper will join us tomorrow, plus movie reviews from Alan Adams of the Maine Edge. Later on in the week, Mike Farrell, the actor who played B.J. Honeycutt for all those many years on the CBS television series MASH, will join us. Plus, we'll check in Wednesday with another actor, this one who hails from Maine, Caitlin Fitzgerald, who stars currently in the Emmy-nominated Showtime series Masters of Sex. Plus, lots of draft coverage and more as we get things rolling in the first full week week of May, starting tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock here on Downtown. Don't forget, Dale Duff and Clem Labrie get your week started in style 6 a.m. tomorrow on the Morning Pitch. Check them out, and we'll see you tomorrow afternoon at 4. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you Monday on Downtown.
So much brighter there. You can't forget all your troubles, forget all your cares. So go downtown.